gonna use our mic, so can we just?
I have this just so that when I'm playing guitar, I'm balanced, but we're fine using this.
Do you think for the Zoom as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, if I didn't have the guitar, I wouldn't even bother.
Before you start, can you announce the patient?
Uh-huh. Really? I don't think so. Let me do this though. Let's go in here and spotlight that for everyone.
Can you tell them that we're gonna start soon?
Yeah, I think as long as they are all muted, I think we're okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep, they're all muted. Excellent. What? Oh, on Zoom? Oh. Oh, Nancy. Aw. Nancy's a dear old friend. Oh, Sue Livy Elwell. From Tel Aviv. I wasn't sure if my sister would be here or not. Trying to see. No. It's a lovely, lovely attendance there. All right. Well, we'll get started. No, just Gail.
Can I keep it, or you want it back?
No, I don't need to know.
I wanted to have it while I'm listening to you in case there's something I can bust out.
Do you want, do you have what you need? You just need a pen?
I just need a
I don't need, I
pen.
know, okay, let's
all good.
start.
Yeah. We begin our service with the familiar words of the 23rd Psalm. You'll find them on page 576. Adonai roi lo echsar binot sheyarbitzeni al mei menuchot yenaleni nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech vegetz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni לפניי, שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא אחסר.
A Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I lack nothing. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me to water in places of repose. God renews my life. God guides me in right path, as befits God's name. Though I walk through a valley of deepest darkness, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My drink is abundant. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai for many long years. The Hebrew word for funeral is halvaya, and it literally means accompanying, escorting. And that is what every one of you is doing today. You are accompanying Marcia, Marty, Cohn, Spiegel on the last stations toward her final resting place. And you are accompanying her family, the mourners, as they walk past those stations and into the time without her. And as you do that, you are also accompanying yourself and everyone who came out as you all walked this path together. Jewish tradition says, may her memory be for a blessing. Sometimes in the wake of a loss, memories can be painful, saddening, even when the loss was anticipated. Even when the person was a source of wisdom, a source of blessing, a makor habracha. But over time, memories can and will offer solace. Your memories and Marty's far-reaching legacy can, will become, and already are, the rod and the staff that comfort, that guide toward green pastures and still waters, that recall the goodness and fullness of life, of a life lived intensely, passionately, with determination and curiosity. A life you all shared with Marty, a life she shared with so many, across generations, genders, and borders, burning bright in valleys and on mountain tops. We will continue with Psalm 121 on page 577.
Ezri me'im Adonai, osei shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai, osei shamayim va'aretz. Esainai el harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Esainai el harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, Osei shamayim va'aretz. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your guardian. Adonai is your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. Adonai will guard your going and coming now and forever.
When one is in pain, one longs for help, for healing. Mourning is a time of pain, a moment when the soul needs comfort and care, healing. Marty's life, her work, was about healing. She was a tachlis woman, not one to sugarcoat reality. Realities she herself endured, realities she saw others endure. When one lifts one's eyes to the mountains in search for help and healing, one knows that certain things cannot be made whole. But that too is part of healing, to not erase what has been damaged, but to seek shlemut, wholeness, peace, in the presence of what cannot be undone. We cannot and we must not pray for complete healing when we know that complete healing may not be possible. Jewish tradition cautions us against praying in vain. These insights shaped Debbie Friedman's Misha Berach, composed at Marty's request for her Simchat Chochmah, a celebration of aging and wisdom when she turned 60. By 60, and often long before, we carry fewer illusions. Praying for complete healing may feel wrong, but one can pray for a process of healing, for the strength to remain connected to sources of blessings, to be sustained by them. The words of the Misha Berach are on page 371.
Of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Bless those in need of healing with refuah say, Amen.
The sun shone through the windows. The lush green garden waved outside. A friend of Marty's from the Jewish Women's Collective, Benot Esh, a chaplain, and myself sang together Lechi Lach. Caretaker Noor sat by Marty's side, smiling. That was the last time I saw Marty. She rested in her reclinable armchair, wearing one of her famous large necklaces. Her eyes were often closed, but she was alert, present with everyone in the room. When her friend chanted a melody from Benot Esh's repertoire, Marty opened her eyes. They sparked recollection, knowing, endurance, wisdom gained throughout a life dedicated to raising Jewish women's voices, a life of resilience and strength and courage, of Torah, poetry, and song, of fire and art and passion. The life of a trailblazer, a maverick, the life of a woman. A life that was about healing, healing from falsehoods, from silence, from double standards. When essential aspects of one's personality are not acknowledged, one cannot be whole. One cannot have shlemut. Marty experienced this early on and throughout her life. Much of what fueled her intensity and radical quest for visibility might go back to her childhood and youth. The life of Marcia Gladys Cohn began on October 16, 1927, when she was born the middle child of Helen and Al Cohn in Chicago. Her parents, both born in the States at the cusp of a new century in 1899, raised 3 children, Selma, Marcia, and Bertram, within a lower-class Jewish community during the Depression. Marcia was a precocious child. She learned to read before she was supposed to. One early life lesson was that she had to hide, diminish parts of herself, her ability, her pride. A kindergarten girl who could already read was considered strange. So she learned to pretend that she was slow, to forego the praise she deserved, the giddiness of a young child who knew she had something unusual. A girl who wanted to learn, who wanted to educate herself, was considered strange, also in her parents' eyes. When, at 16, she was offered a tuition-free place in a new program for gifted students at the University of Chicago, at a time when Jews were admitted only by quota, her parents did not allow her to attend. She did later enroll at Rockford College, earning a liberal arts degree, though she always also had an interest in science and might have gone on to medical school had it been up to her. Marty was not only a young woman struggling with the limits placed on all women of her time and society. She was also a young Jewish woman. At Rockford, she was the only Jew. Anti-Semitic tropes and biases were everywhere. But she also enjoyed her time on campus. She loved fencing and dancing and swimming in the lakes. She rode horses and even managed to own one, saving it from the butcher. She had friends, she had mentors. Yet decades later, she learned of a betrayal that would taint the memory of her Rockford chapter. The mentor she had trusted and admired most had denied her the honor of valedictorian because she was Jewish. For someone who spent her life fighting for recognition and dignity, this revelation must have cut deeply. Even the fiercest advocates have vulnerabilities. They can hold their heads high and still go home and weep, knowing their essence has not been honored with the kavod it deserves, knowing they have to accomplish everything by themselves, without support from family, pedigree, money, society, generic leadership pipelines. Although Marty had lasting relationships with childhood friends, she knew early on that she was basically on her own. And she sensed that if she did not want to repeat what she had seen her mother's generation endure, lives constrained, damaged by gender bias and bigotry, she would have to create new spaces for herself. But it would take time. After marrying Sidney Spiegel, an engineer and Harvard Business School graduate, she became the mother of 5 children. Over the course of 13 years, the couple welcomed Linda and Randy, Judy, Edward, and Steve. At some point, somewhere between Chicago, Rockford, and Boston, she also decided she was done being cold. When the family moved to Los Angeles, first to Westchester and then to Rolling Hills Estates, she found the place that would be her home for the rest of her life. The Palos Verdes Peninsula was still largely wilderness then. There were horses, which she loved, but there was also rampant anti-Semitism, clubs that wouldn't admit Jews. And few Jews at that time had ventured beyond the Fairfax district. Marty was a literal and figurative pioneer as she began to forge her way through the canyons and valleys of the Hill, the estates of the South Bay. Drawing from her own childhood experience, she became an advocate for academically advanced students. She stood up for her children's Jewish identity. She became deeply involved in synagogue life at Temple Menorah, Congregation Ner Tamid, and Temple Bethel. Over 13 years, family dynamics can shift. The marriage and family life began to be affected by Sidney's alcoholism, a condition that to this day is often a stigma for those impacted by it, especially in the Jewish community, where the prevailing narrative was, and sometimes still is, that Jews don't get drunk like the Gentiles. And overall in a society that would blame a wife's negligence or hysteria for a husband's shortcomings and failures. What do you do when you are surrounded by things that anger you because they cause you pain, that make you feel like all your resolve might not go anywhere, by realizing how your voice is not recognized as it should be, by living with societal double standards, lies, self-serving biases, and denials? Again, like a child in kindergarten, like a young, curious girl ready to go to university, Marty faced a choice: to pretend, to shrink, to accept, or to act. And this time, and even more so after her husband's passing, she was ready to act. To tear down wallpaper, smash idols, expose falsehoods, and pull back the curtain, throw out the rug, to expose the truth and let in the light. She joined a radical feminist consciousness-raising group, B'not Esh. She learned of other women's stories. She spoke relentlessly about alcoholism and abuse in Jewish families. She earned a degree in Jewish communal social work. She taught at Hebrew Union College. She founded lecture series, study groups, chavrutot, poetry and art circles that lasted and still last decades. She crossed borders inside and out. She rafted the Amazon and the Colorado. She hiked to Machu Picchu. She rode the Trans-Siberian Railway and the Orient Express. She crossed oceans on freighters. She studied women's rituals and power portals across cultures, documented them, photographed them, and brought them back to her growing community of peers that spanned age and gender. After decades of feeling alone, she knew she was no longer on her own. Her impact on Jewish feminist agency, her influence on Jewish women proudly claiming and reshaping, rewriting the tradition is huge. She created lifelines for Jewish women, a legacy that lives on in the current generations and in generations to come, in those of her own grand and great-grandchildren, whom she loved very much, and in others. Marty believed in people's capacity to praise and rise and to grow toward healing. She exacted that people need not be an expert in order to achieve something positive, but that they must be open and willing to try. Her life was complex, and especially in her later years, it was not easy. But she loved being alive. She was able to stay in her house, supported by caretaker Nora and other caretakers, her children and their families, her friends and community, until her last day. Even when she was ill and depended on the help and care from others, she would answer a doctor's question by stating that her health was excellent and that her quality of life was great. She was not able to heal her body, but she was able to heal her mind and the minds of many others, to find the kind of wholeness of shlemut that brought her peace. There is a poem by the Israeli poet Zelda about the many names a person carries. Marty's Hebrew name was Miriam, a name that was deeply important to her. Like Miriam, she carried the power of women dancing and singing, but not in a sweet or bucolic way. There was a fire inside Miriam when she danced at the water's edge, and there was a fire inside Marty as well. Alongside that fire, Miriam provided water. She was a wellspring of life, of wisdom, of community. Like Marty, who planted and watered a whole chorus of Jewish feminist voices, a lush, shining, and waving orchard. Like Miriam, Marty was outspoken. She rallied around the feminine. She was industrious. She said things she came to regret. A trailblazer, a wellspring, a ritual maker and song leader, any leader cannot, need not, must not always be nice and smooth, cannot always be conventional. And Marty was anything but conventional. Zichronah livracha. May her memory always be the blessing that it already is. Among the music she determined to be played at her funeral is the song about Miriam dancing with the timbrels.
You can find the words to Miriam's song on page 646 in your Siddur. Marty and I often spoke about our mutual relationships with the beautiful and talented Debbie Friedman. I had known Debbie for much of my life and had the privilege of working with her and singing with her and learning from her. And when I met Marty, it was that first kernel that brought us together, the commonality of that relationship. And then I'm reminded also by Rabbi's beautiful words, thank you, Rabbi, I'm reminded that Marty said to me after my eldest daughter was born, and reiterated it again after my youngest daughter was born 19 years ago. She said, you know, you spent your whole life fighting for the rights of Jewish women, and now you've been gifted with two so that they can fill that new space that you fought for. And I said to her, you were the one that opened that space. So just like Miriam at the water's edge, we too now, my friends, will sing to this woman who was certainly a weaver of so much in our Jewish community, in our Jewish world, and opened doors and parted seas so that all women could cross. And all women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced was a weaver of unique variety. The tapestry she wove was one that sang our history. With every thread and every strand she crafted her delight. A woman touched with spirit, she dances toward the light. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced all night long. As Miriam stood upon the shore and gazed across the sea, the wonder of this miracle she soon came to believe. Whoever thought the sea would part with an outstretched hand, and we would pass to freedom and march to promised land. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced all night long. And Miriam, the prophetess, took her timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her, just as she had planned. And Miriam raised her voice in song and sang with praise and might. We've just lived through a miracle, we're gonna dance tonight. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. Marty and the women danced and danced the whole night long. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long.
We're now going to have 4 speakers who will share their memories of Marty. And the first one I would like to invite up is Rabbi Ruth Sohn, from the friend from Benot Esh that I mentioned earlier. And please come up.
I first met Marty in May 1984 at the 3rd annual retreat of Benot Esh, Daughters of Fire, a Jewish feminist spirituality collective, as you've heard. We were both among the first and long-lasting members of Benot Esh to this day. For most of us in Benot Esh at the start, Marty was the age of our mothers. She was 1 year younger than my mother, for example. And yet, she was so different from most of our mothers. She was so much more like us. Marty was not satisfied to live, as we've heard, to live within the boundaries of the Jewish tradition she had inherited, or the Jewish community she found herself in. Instead, she chose to actively challenge assumptions about what it meant to be a Jewish woman, to be a woman in the world, but especially a Jewish woman in our world today. She chose to venture into new territory through her own learning and leadership, exploring, experimenting, and creating with us and others new ritual, prayer, theology, and more, touching on virtually every aspect of our lives. Marty quickly and over the years increasingly became an inspiring role model and collaborator, a combination of elder and peer, and a beloved friend to each of us. I'm really speaking for all of this first generation of Benot Esh, and I spoke with as many as I could over the last few days, so I'm channeling them. Marty embodied a fearlessness to speak truth that we all aspired to, the courage to dare that we sang of, and that we tried to live into, each in our own way. Marty was truly a pioneer, as we've heard, one of the first to bring to light the painful realities of alcoholism and drug abuse, domestic violence, and sexual abuse that existed then and still exist in every Jewish community, contrary to the mythology around the Jewish family and Jewish community that persist even today. Marty's ability to be as open and vulnerable as she was in her work and her ability to talk about all these issues, and in how she engaged with each of us individually and as a group, these were precious gifts to us all. One had the feeling there was nothing one could say, nothing one could share that Marty couldn't hear and hold with us. I still marvel at Marty's ability to face down the barriers and limitations and the serious problems, along with the pain she encountered along the way. How instead of turning away, she dug in with serious engagement and research, determination and creativity to turn her experiences into fodder to open new pathways, not only for herself, but for everyone. Just one example. In 1987, Marty published a book, Women Speak to God, The Prayers and Poems of Jewish Women, 1987. While a number of such books might exist today, Marty's was the first. As Marty writes in the introduction, the idea of the book was born 10 years earlier in 1976, when she went looking for prayers and poems written by Jewish women for a creative service she wanted to put together for her synagogue. But every collection she found included virtually only material written by men, and no one could help her find what she was looking for. Marty decided then and there to do the research, to find the poetry and prayers of Jewish women she knew must exist, and to make them available to others. Back then, finding a publisher for such a book proved as much of a challenge as first finding the sources, but Marty persisted, and after 10 years, finally succeeded. Women Speak to God ends with a blank page with these words across the top. This book is not complete until the reader adds here her own voice and prayers. A perfect example of Marty's determination to bring her learning forward in ways that would not only enlighten, but would empower others. We benefited also from Marty's early involvement. We in B'nai D'Esh benefited from her involvement in Project Kesher, a network of Jewish women who made many trips to different locations all throughout the former Soviet Union, starting in the early 90s, to share their knowledge and leadership skills with countless numbers of Jewish women there, to train them to become the sorely needed community leaders and activists who would have the capacity to revitalize Jewish communities and Jewish life in the former Soviet Union. Marty was one of the first women to make these trips, sharing her skills as a community organizer, activist, a facilitator, and teacher. Inspired by her example and what she shared with us, several other members of B'nai D'Esh joined her in Project Kesher trips, participating in these life-changing trips together with her and on their own. Everyone I spoke to in B'nai D'Esh these last days, everyone, spoke passionately about one particular experience we had with Marty back at our retreat in 1985. In the middle of the retreat, Marty received a phone call that her husband Sid had just suffered a major stroke. It was a total devastating shock. We helped Marty make the flight arrangements for the following morning. And that terrible night of uncertainty and fear, we did a hands-on healing ritual with Marty, the first time we ever did anything like that as a group. For most of us as individuals, it was a first. Marty was game. She needed this, and she trusted us, and she helped us trust ourselves. This hands-on healing ritual proved incredibly powerful. Marty would forever say, "We levitated her that night." She experienced her body being physically lifted off the bed. And she said this ritual carried her through the next days and the whole next year. What we all experienced that night proved a pivotal moment for B'nai D'Esh. From that point on, we continued to create and perform rituals for each other at every one of our annual retreats. Rituals for healing, for grieving, for celebrating, for marking and making space for the experiences for which we individually felt the greatest need to be seen and held. This ritual making has remained a core part of what we do together at our retreats. And in this and so many ways, for both the serious and the fun stuff, Marty was always at the core of B'nai D'Esh, among the most consistent in attendance, even though she lived here, and for most of these years, we had retreats on the East Coast in the New York area. When it became too difficult for Marty to travel to the East Coast, we moved the location of our retreats to a retreat center near her home for a couple of years, until in 2019, it became clear to Marty that even without the travel, attending the retreat in person was just too much for her. She was clear and she was ready to step back, but we were not ready to let go. And we changed the rules of B'nai D'Esh so we could make Marty a standing member of the collective, even if she couldn't attend the in-person retreats. As individuals and a group, we cherished visits with Marty over these last years, on Zoom or the phone, staying in touch with Marty through Judy and Linda and Randy as well. And I want to just say a personal note that thanks to Rabbi Julia Knoblauch, I was able to have 2 beautiful visits with Marty, with your accompaniment in the last half year. And I work at HUC, Hebrew Union College here in LA, and I want to just add a word beyond my experience of Marty in B'nai D'Esh about how I experienced Marty's impact directly at Hebrew Union College. Truly the richest learning experience I had at HUC were the Spiegel seminars. The Spiegel seminars were an annual event for at least 7 or 8 years. Founded, funded, and started by Marty and planned together with Linda and other members of our faculty, staff, and community. These were rare events because they brought together the students, faculty, and staff of all 3 schools at HUC in LA. It was the only time we had this kind of opportunity. The students we were preparing to be rabbis, Jewish educators, and what used to be called professionals in the Jewish communal services and now called Jewish nonprofit management, that whole enormous sphere. Every year, the seminars addressed another issue, an issue that the planners felt was not being adequately addressed in our Jewish communities. Sound like Marty? Including issues around end-of-life issues, trans and other gender identities, Jews with disabilities, individuals and families struggling with mental illness, and family and sexual abuse. Each year, all participants were invited into interactive learning together with case studies, role-playing, text study, and discussion to approach the issue at hand from the different vantage points of rabbi, educator, and community leader, so we could see how we could benefit from each other's perspectives and approaches. This was a unique learning experience at HUC that came to an end during COVID. It was just one example of how Marty combined her generosity with her vision of what is still needed in the Jewish community to bring the next generation of Jewish leaders into study and conversation together around these topics that are so often still avoided. May we all continue to keep Marty's spirit alive in our own lives. May we follow her example to bring the fullness of our lives into deep engagement with others, to bring more light, more love, and more hope into our world. Zichronah Livracha.
The next speaker is Rabbi Ann Brenner.
Thank you. Thank you. So right about now, I feel like we should all join in a chorus of the song from Wicked. Because I knew you, I have been changed for good. I'm sure almost all of us could sing that song about Marty. I met Marty within a couple of weeks of moving to Los Angeles in 1981. I was at Jack Roth's wonderful bookstore, wonderful Jewish bookstore on Pico, and she saw me holding a book, which will remain nameless, and she said, "You must be one of the new Jewish communal service students. No one else would read that book." Now, my memory has altered that a little bit, and I always say no one else in their right mind would read that book, but I don't think that's what Marty said. So then Marty's invitations began, and the themes of the events to which I was invited were far-ranging. Certainly the cutting-edge Jewish feminist events, monthly Shabbat Shenit, which was the second Shabbos of every month. We would get together and we would create these amazing services. Yearly Bat Kol retreats, which was kind of a West Coast knockoff of B'nai D'Aish. Special events like the Timbrels of Miriam. And by the way, I think the song you just sang was written for Marty, for her celebration of her turning 60, which we thought at the time was so old. The Shekhinah conference. We shared several seders, including one at Debbie Friedman's house. We spent the high holidays first with the labor Zionists. May they return to ascendancy. And for several years, held do-it-ourselves feminist services with a small group of like-minded feminists. We attended the National Havurah Institute together and the Jewish Renewal Kala, where she was made I can't think of the title right now, but we were honored to be, Eshat Chazon, Women of Vision. There were conferences, as you've heard, where Marty broke through the Jewish community's denial and forced us to face the existence of alcoholism and violence within Jewish families. But there were also conferences on Jewish poetry and Jewish art, literature. I mean, it was just so rich, so rich. And especially for me, there was a monthly women's writing circle in which Marty made me take myself seriously as a writer. We attended funerals, her mother, Sid, Phoebe, Debbie Friedman, and others. She stood by me during my pregnancy, and when my daughter was born, helped me to plan the baby naming. Because of Marty, I met my best friend, Avi Rose. Some of you might have remembered him as Andy Rose. He couldn't be here, but he sent the following message. I am one of the many people who can say that meeting Marty Spiegel changed my life. We met at a Jewish educational conference in 1980, and I mentioned my interest in the communal service program at HUC, from which she had recently graduated. She promptly grabbed his hand and took him around. You got to meet this one, you got to meet that one. The director of admissions, all the people, and then by that summer, he was fully ensconced at HUC. Thank you, Marty, he said. Through the decades, he said, we shared experiences that were both hilarious and deep. The first AIDS Project LA Gala in 1985, where he wore his first tuxedo. And then one night in New York, they just both happened to have tickets to see Liza Minnelli at Carnegie Hall, and they got, what an experience. He said, "We shared so many passionate, meaningful, and fun conversations. She was unfailingly interested, appreciative, and encouraging, and opinionated, of course. A huge heart and a keen mind. She lived fully and broadly." And he finished by saying the world is most definitely a better place for Marty Spiegel, having been in it. Whenever Avi was in town, he and I would head down to Palos Verdes to visit her. And the last time we visited her together, we found her in her recliner reading the newspaper. We walked in, and Marty greeted us with a synopsis of what she had just read. She said, "He said there's a lot of chaos in the world right now." And then she looked up at us and she said, "You know who's going to fix it?" he said. And she pointed to Avi and me and said, "We are. We will." Over and over, maybe a dozen times, she repeated the words, "There's a lot of chaos, and you know who's going to fix it?" Each time she paused, nodded at us definitively, and said, "We will." Marty, dear Marty, there's a lot of chaos in the world right now, a lot of horror, and with you as a role model, because we knew you, in your memory, you know who's going to fix it? We will.
Thank you. I invite now up Linda Allen, Marty's daughter.
This is the fourth version of what I wrote. It would be easy to go on endlessly with stories about Mom, but trying to keep us not overwhelm everyone. So friends and family, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your support for Mom and for us the last few years. Words cannot express our thanks for the caregivers who have been with Mom, caring for us as well. Antonia, Nora, Cynthia, and Elizabeth began the journey with us. Later, Majoy and then Gladys Ann joined the team as Mom's needs grew. Thank you to Kat Chaplain Joshua, the staff at Vitus and 24-Hour Care, and to Rabbi Julia, who has been with us in the final steps of this journey. You have heard from Ruth and from Anne about Mom in the public world. In your notes, you recognized her as creative, brave, adventurous, organized, a connector, a leader. You shared how she changed your lives. To us, she was Mom. As you heard, she grew up in a family where her sister was the pretty, sweet one, and Mom was the smart one who was fed sugar to make her sweeter. Her parents turned down the opportunity for her to attend the University of Chicago at 16. She was a girl. It was too expensive. 2 years later, she entered Rockford College, receiving a full scholarship that her parents could not turn down. Although she has been honored for her work in many organizations, she never got the recognition that she craved from my grandparents or my father. As 5 children with a 13-year age span, we had different experiences of Mom. We girls had a loving, creative mother in our early years. That changed when we moved. My brothers were born. My father became increasingly unavailable due to work and alcoholism. And we were in a more rural community. My brothers experienced that challenging time, but also the later years when Mom was again a supportive, creative parent. As a parent, my mom was driven by the values that she wanted to pass on to us. that she perhaps had not experienced on her own. She was committed to supporting us in ways she was not supported by her parents. She was a force of nature, advocating for us when we were not being challenged or faced difficulties at school. If we wanted to be Girl Scouts, she became the Girl Scout leader. She exposed us all to the arts. Vacations for us girls included sketching time every day. I don't know that she did that with my brothers. She made sure we all experienced movies, live concerts, and theaters, all kinds of museums and cross-cultural events. She encouraged our efforts in music, art, dance, sports for Stephen, and more was our greatest fan. We grew up loving puzzles and games. She made sure we enjoyed nature. However, she hated gardening, when we got the green gene from her mother, and her love of hiking and being in the outdoors really came later. She taught us family was important, regularly visiting family in Los Angeles every 5 years or so, traveling to relatives in Chicago and the East Coast. College was important to her. There was never a question about whether or not we would go. In public, my mom was well-dressed, a leader and advocate for her children. At home, she was someone else. She was not the mother who helped you with your homework. You had to figure it out yourself. She was not the mom who made your lunch or had fresh cookies for an afternoon snack. We learned independence early. She had a temper triggered by anything, most often a messy room, food uneaten. In retrospect, probably the result of tiredness, dealing with young children alone, living in a more rural community, and lack of support from her husband and family. At ages 6, 9, and 10, not 3 different times, but Judy, Randy, and I, we weren't sure if it was worse to be home with Dad, who couldn't care for us, or home with Mom, who would scream and beat us. My mom joined Al-Anon when I was in high school, and it marked the beginning of a change in her ability to parent. In the 1970s, when my father stopped smoking and drinking, life changed dramatically. She began the journey that you have heard about from Ruth and Ann. After my father's death, she continued on that path, and until 2018, traveled the world. We are blessed that we had many good years with her as a supportive, caring mother later in her life, as a grandmother and a great-grandmother. We are blessed that we can appreciate her for the person she became and for the gifts that she gave each of us. We know her greatest joy came from seeing us together and knowing that we would support each other in challenging times. Her grandchildren have been blessed by experiencing the best of my mom's life. May her memory continue to a blessing and an inspiration for us all.
Thank you, Linda. And now I would like to invite up, where is he, Matt? Matthew Allen? Yeah, there you go. The grandson, a grandson.
My kids have not gotten to know Grandma like I did. And yet, they have. I remember growing up, I'd go to visit. Grandma's house was always magical. The seeming endless expanse of her backyard, a bridle trail where we could feed apples to horses, walk down to the stables, plants, plants upon plants, plants growing on plants on plants. And in the house, I mean, her house still feels very much the same as it was when I was 10, except for there's not a waterbed for Sharon and I to fight over. And, you know, in the house, every object has this amazing magical story. masks, artwork, every piece of furniture, art, curated like this incredible museum. And Grandma letting us roam really with few guidelines, explore, experience. She always had 2 milk crates full of random exotic instruments, and absolutely overjoyed by us making as much noise as possible. Really a sense of freedom and, just curating curiosity. She took us tide pooling, she took us to the beach, and she took us on trips. I remember, I was actually telling the boys about this on our flight down here, because we used to, in the land before time, fly as kids, and Mom and Dad would leave us on one end, and Grandma and Aunt Judy and Aunt Randy would be waiting at the gate, so excited to see us at the other end. She took us to Catalina Island, and where we got to kayak and go on glass bottom boats and all these exotic adventures for a 10-year-old that turned into more exotic adventures as a young adult. Sharon, thank you for suggesting to Grandma that we go on trips. Because when I was 17 years old and just out of high school, she took me for 3 weeks to Brazil. I wanted to pursue photography because I grew up thinking my grandma was a National Geographic scholar, and I wanted to do that. But I had no interest in people like she did. I just wanted to see animals. So she took me to Brazil, where we got to explore the Amazon. And it was never, she always pushed her, like, we're gonna find something that is adventure and also where I can be comfortable, because I'm Grandma. Just spectacular times, traveling, seeing the world, experiencing experiences. And it really opened me up to the idea of adventure. And the idea that, like, hey, you can just do this. You just go. So fast forward a little while, and a few years ago I found myself a fairly recently sober alcoholic. I found myself a fairly recently single dad. What are you gonna do? We're gonna go adventuring, boys. And we started really building family trips into our life, where we spend our winter exploring the ski hills in Eastern Oregon. We're just gonna spend our spring and summer in a boat, rafting, paddling. We're gonna go see the wilderness. And it was somewhere in one of those journeys where, I think I'd leave a breadcrumb trail of M&Ms up the side of a mountain trying to get 5-year-old Leo to his first summit. And 7-year-old Teddy, 6-year-old Teddy saying, "Dad, I can't go any further," followed immediately by, "What's that like over there? Can we go over there?" And realizing, like, you know what, we're just doing Grandma. We're doing self-discovery through adventure and through wilderness. And on that level of also realizing that we had this, that I was gifted at this amazing role model for how to heal as a family by putting it in the air, talking openly about our experiences, our hurts, our feelings, our joys. And I know now that, every new experience, every adventure we take, we carry her spirit with us. Thank you.
source of strength, who blessed the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you all for sharing these memories, all so much on so many different layers in the spirit of Marty. It's been an honor and a privilege to meet her over in those last months and to meet you all and to be with you. Before we end this service, I want to share a few announcements. There is a meal of condolences that will follow in the social hall with time to share additional memories. The burial will take place tomorrow on Wednesday at 10 a.m. at Mount Sinai in Burbank, and it will be officiated by Rabbi Ann Brenner. Shiva will be held tonight, Tuesday, at 7 p.m., and tomorrow, also at 7 p.m., at the Cohn Spiegel residence at 4856 Fern Creek Drive in Rolling Hills Estates. We recommend carpooling. And when you need the address again, reach out to us. We will give it again, of course. We will now conclude this gathering with the El Maleh Rachamim prayer, the traditional Jewish prayer that asks that the soul, the essence of a deceased person, may find eternal rest in the bonds of life. The words for it are on page 582. And please rise as you are able. Miriam.
El Maleh Rachamim Shochen b'mromim Hametzei menucha nechona Tachat kanafei hashechinah Im kedoshim utarim Kezohar haraki amazhirim Et nishmat Miriam Bat Avraham v'Chana She'alcha le'olama Ba'al harachamim Yastireha בסתר כנפיו לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Marty Cohn Spiegel, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. Amen.
This concludes our service. Thank you all for being here today. And please join the family and us in the social hall.
Of course. Beautiful. Beautiful.